The senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I would like to speak to an amendment that's been filed by my colleague from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, and I expect he'll be here momentarily to speak specifically to his amendment. But it has to do with the Keystone Pipeline. This is an appropriate, I think, opportunity to talk about the energy needs that our country has, the way in which those are being addressed, and we believe that there is a great opportunity for our country to benefit in so many ways from the building of the Keystone Pipeline. Now, obviously, the senator from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, his state is benefiting enormously from the oil and gas find that they have in their state, lots of energy resources, abundant energy resources, and as typically the case, you've got to have a way in which to get those to the ultimate marketplace. Well, the most efficient way, of course, to do that is through pipelines, and the Keystone Pipeline, which has been proposed now for several years, is a way in which we could move about 830,000 barrels of oil every single day, and that's according to the Department of Energy. Now, not only would this pipeline transport Canadian crude to U.S. markets, but would also benefit oil production from the Bakken Formation and the Upper Great Plains. Now, just to put that figure in perspective, Madam President, 830,000 barrels represents about half the amount that the United States imports from the Middle East each and every day. According to the Department of Energy, much of the U.S. and Canadian oil shipped through this pipeline will be refined at the Gulf Coast refineries and would likely offset heavy crude imports from Venezuela. Keystone XL pipeline is a $5.3 billion investment. According to the Obama State Department, the pipeline would support 42,000 jobs across the country, and that's over a 1 to 2 year construction period. Approximately 3,900 would be directly employed in construction activities. These jobs would translate into approximately $2 billion in wages and earnings. Keystone XL would also generate much-needed tax revenue in several states, including an estimated $5 billion in additional property taxes throughout the operational life of the pipeline. The Keystone XL pipeline has been under review for now 1,819 days. September 19th will mark the 5-year anniversary of the initial application for the pipeline's presidential permit. 4 environmental reviews have already concluded that the pipeline would not have a significant impact on the environment. 4 environmental reviews, Madam President, to date have come to that conclusion. As President Obama continues to delay, Canada's oil supply is growing by the day and is expected to double by the year 2025. Canadian oil producers are quickly building pipelines to Canada's east and west coast to ship their oil to foreign markets. Meanwhile, reports indicate that we may not get a decision out of this now, out of the administration, until the year 2014. By delaying approval of the pipeline, President Obama is providing China and other nations with an opportunity to outcompete the United States and gain access to Canada's growing oil supply. Senator Hoeven's resolution declares that the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline is in our national interest. And that, Madam President, is what the State Department will have to conclude at the end of this current environmental impact statement process, which is supposed to be wrapped up here in the coming weeks. At that point, Secretary Kerry, the Secretary of State, has 90 days to determine if the pipeline is in our national interest. Now, I would state again, Madam President, this pipeline is going to create jobs, it's going to boost investment, it's going to reduce our dependence on Venezuelan oil, and it will strengthen our relationship with our largest trading partner. Keystone XL pipeline is clearly in our national interests, and I would hope that the United States Senate would go on record to that effect, Madam President. If you think about the impacts that this can have on our economy, on jobs, the impact that can have on reducing that dangerous dependence that we have on foreign sources of energy, this makes all the sense in the world. And I would reiterate what I said earlier, and that is that this has been studied, this has been scrutinized, this has been reviewed now for 5 years. 1,819 days have elapsed since this permit was applied for in the very beginning. 5 years have lapsed, 4 environmental reviews. There is now currently yet another environmental impact study underway, which is supposed to be concluded soon, at the conclusion of which there will be a 90-day period in which the Secretary of State has to make a determination about whether or not the Keystone Pipeline is in our national interest. What this amendment, offered by my colleague from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, would do is simply put the Senate on the record as saying that the Keystone Pipeline is, in fact, in our national interest. I believe that's a statement that the United States Senate ought to make. We ought to weigh in on this subject, and it's clear from all the economic impacts, clear from the environmental impacts, clear from the need that we have to get away from the dependence that we have on foreign sources of energy, that this is a win-win for Americans. Win-win for American consumers, win-win for American workers who need those jobs, win-win for the American economy and not having to get so much of our oil and our energy supply from outside the United States. And so, Madam President, I would urge my colleagues, and I hope we get this chance as we continue debate on this bill, to discuss this amendment, but also to ultimately vote on it and to declare once and for all the United States Senate that this is in fact in the national interest. And I see my colleague from North Dakota, who is the author of this amendment, is here, and I credit him for bringing this amendment to the floor and giving us an opportunity to discuss what I think is a very important issue, not only to his state, to my state, and to the many others that would be impacted directly by this, but to the entire economy in our country. And so I would yield to the senator from North Dakota, who was the author of the amendment. I asked the senator from North Dakota, and he has been a great leader on this and on all these energy issues as we debate energy policy here in the United States Senate. But my understanding is that according to the State Department, President Obama's State Department, that the pipeline would support 42,000 jobs across the country. Now, there have been some discussions and debates. The President, not too long ago, made some comment in front of an editorial board in one of the country's major newspapers that this is only going to create maybe a couple thousand jobs, and that was a very minimalist thing. And it strikes me, at least, that when you have an unemployment rate that continues to hover in the 7.5% range, you have the lowest labor participation rate in our country today that we've had literally in 35 years. You have to go back to the Carter administration. And the real unemployment rate, in other words, those who are not only unemployed, but those who would like to be working full-time or to be forced to work part-time, or those who have quit looking, is actually much higher, about 14%, about 22 million Americans who fall into that category, that you would be very interested in anything that would create shovel-ready jobs. We've heard from this administration, particularly when we were debating the stimulus, that we need shovel-ready jobs. We need jobs that we can get people to work immediately. Well, this is exactly what fits that description, fits it perfectly. And I would ask the senator from North Dakota if it's his understanding as well that it actually is thousands of jobs that would be created as a result of building the pipeline. And wouldn't that be something that we would add to the argument? There are many arguments, but this certainly is one when we're talking about a sluggish economy where growth continues to hover in that 1% to 2% range. To get the economy growing and expanding again, not only do you get the immediate construction jobs, but when you're producing energy in this country and lowering the cost of energy because we're actually having more of it produced here as opposed to importing it from somewhere else around the world, that it gives us a competitive advantage. And it is good for economic growth and good for job creation. But could the senator from North Dakota speak to that issue of jobs and what his understanding is in terms of the jobs that perhaps could be created if, in fact, we did move forward with the pipeline?
Madam